Good morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
I love barns.
Barns, especially one that doesn't look like a New England barn. That looks like an English barn, the way they put that sort of stone structure together. Yes.
I can't even say where am I before you start to tell me where I am.
Well,
Yes.
look at the green grass. That's so English. Look, obviously we have daffodils here in the US, but that's a very English scene.
You're correct. I think it's Cymru or Cymru. I slaughter these names and I should know them better. This is up on the kind of the western side, the northwestern side, right before you get to the Scottish border. And it just looks wonderful. I mean, it looks like an incredible time of year. This is only, I think, a week and a half or 2 weeks old, is what I think.
Correct. Very much a
Um,
spring scene. That's when the daffodils come up.
yeah, it's just beautiful, isn't it? Starts our day off. It's a little bit dry here, Deirdre, and a little cool today. It's going to only be about 78, 79.
Darn. And
I know.
meanwhile, we have a wind chill of something in the 30s here today.
Yeah. And, I can't see a cloud. I just, I don't even know what they look like anymore, which can be a bad thing. So, the application of the AI reasoning models, Deirdre, in building a case for a new business opportunity. So, last week we did a showing how you can use a reasoning model to help you just learn how to do research, competitive analysis, and so forth. In the case there, we did it about the US economy and say, tell us how you would do this and the factors you would look at, and then do the analysis and using the reasoning models to do it, which was very instructive. Um, but today, we're going to actually apply it to a new business opportunity in a defined market. And we're going to use two different types of models. We're going to use both the large language model, the Gen AI-like model that most of us are familiar with, and we're going to use reasoning models like Deep Search, DeepSeek, so forth, to show you the difference and show you where you apply which one and why. So before I get started, Deirdre, do you want to add any news, any thoughts before we get going here?
One thought in particular, and I'll bring this up in various ways throughout the presentation, Tom, and that is you and I talk in terms of a human-machine partnership. That what you're going to be presenting and working with this model is the machine part of that. But we can't forget the human part of this. In fact, I've got to point out that because you've created the prompts and you've created the information you have already fed into these models, that there's already a significant human component to this. It's not as if the machine is out there creating all of the information you're going to present. So I just suggest that people think in terms of we're going to see a very interesting machine component, but it's already based partly on the human component. And we'll talk about how the humans come around afterwards so that together the humans and the machines create the output that can then be used.
Yeah, this is really important, and we'll deal with a little bit of that forensics as we go through, as I know you know. But we're going to do a third version of this where we go through how do you actually maintain discipline. And as you and I have talked about, this is almost as difficult to maintain as you do when you do scientific experiments because you have to know what's going on underneath the table. But the advantage is enormous, as you all will see. The one thing I would say, Deirdre, is that you constantly remind all of us when using these tools that early on you want to see as much as you can, as flat as you can, what the machine knows. And that what you and I would do with something like this is we would then, once we have these machines, we know what they've produced based on our limited prompts in, then we would take and put the edge of the entrepreneur in there and start to say, so by the time we're done, we're probably 60% our content and only 40% of the machine, at least more than 50%. Now, you could say if we used un, um, unrefined prompts, we might be 10%. We probably here, because of all the input we're going to provide, we're probably closer to 15, maybe 20, but no more than that. The machine is really doing the bulk of the work. And this should never be represented as my work because I'm too small a piece. So with that said, now we're going to just to one final piece before I get started. That's what the third video is all about. How could you use this in a university setting? Because by the way, we should be teaching people to use this. You and I expect really good tech entrepreneurs to be using this right now. The CEOs, the CTOs should be using this kind of thing right now. For their work. And that's what we're trying to do here is to provide them an easy way if they aren't comfortable yet with using it. So I'm going to pull up my screen, Deirdre. I'm going to start with a Chrome browser. And here I have pre-populated, this is Claude actually. And Claude is an LLM. It's a Gen AI model. And it's not meant at this point to be fully populated by up-to-the-minute material from the web. So it's best used when you provide the bulk of the content. But what we're going to do here, Deirdre, is I like Claude for this because Claude tends to be a really good, clean LLM for creating what you and I would call projects. So if you notice up here on the left, I have a menu that opens the side. Notice it has new chat, projects, and chats. I'm going to go ahead and select projects. And what you're going to see here is the various projects I've created. We're going to do this, but we're going to do version 2 of it. So we're going to say, and notice it goes through and says, oh, you have only one of them available. This is how to use Claude. Okay. What I really want to do is I want to create a new project. So here's the create button on the right. Then it says name it, new project. And I'm going to call it version 2 this time. And what am I doing here? I'm giving a demo. All right, so let's create that project. Now, why did I do this? Because notice how it lets me put in project knowledge. It also lets me set some instructions for the project, and this is optional. And notice here it says no projects, no knowledge has been added yet. I can do it in various forms. What I'm going to start with, though, Deirdre, is I'm going to start with setting some instructions. Now, I have some instructions I use for all the LLMs, and I will copy and paste them here in. And notice that I start with please use simple language, look for logical inconsistencies. When helping me with critical thinking, be supportive, but do not just support what I say because I say it. Push back when appropriate. Interrogate my thinking, asking me why. Ask clarifying questions until you have enough information and clarity to produce high quality professional output. And then I say on things like this, a clean format, structured sections, bullets, lists, paragraph, or prose paragraph, so you can give me all different versions, whatever you deem best. Don't apologize. I just don't need it apologizing to me. Now, Claude lets you set this. I actually use this in my overall settings that apply globally. So this is sitting in my global settings for all projects, but for this set, I'm just going to put it in here too. It doesn't matter, but you can create your own or you can just let it go. It doesn't really matter. It's more how you want to structure what you do. And this is partly mine. It's partly my son's. He and I've worked on getting them so that we like them, but you can do whatever you wish. So let's start with that. And then I've got now this thing set up. The one thing I do want to do is I do want to add one piece of project knowledge here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a copy of my bio. Now, why would I do that? So I'm doing that so that as I do this, it has the context of me. So in this new idea, it knows that I've built other companies. I've done this kind of thing before. I've written books about it. Now, what I'm not doing yet is I'm not putting the books in there. Now, notice I could upload a file, but when I do that, I'm going to take up a lot more space in the memory than if I put just text, and it will use it more freely and quickly. So I'm going to save myself time, I'm going to do this. I'm going to call it TC Bio. And to do it properly, I would also put Deirdre's bio in there, but for the sake of time, I will keep it this way. Now, notice here I've got this, and these, if you would actually expect to be hyperlinks, but because this will be converted just to raw text, it does not keep the hyperlinks. But notice I just used 1% of my knowledge capacity here by putting that text file in. Were I to put that in as a Word doc or PDF, it would take up at least twice that amount. So when I start putting in our books, Deirdre and so forth, which I would normally do, because it would then use those and how it does the work, this would start to climb. And I've got some projects that are up in the 60 or 70% range by the time I put all the documentation in. But so I have it here now. And the question is, do I continue to work in Claude? And I think yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with what I always start with, which is a prompt that asks, how can we work together on this? So I'm going to just start here, and I'm going to say, I would like to start a new business in Newburyport, Massachusetts. Why? I have family there. I like it. It's cool, and it's a nice place. It's not hot like Arizona, and it's on the other part of the country. Okay, that's why. I would like to have you help me take research data I have collected, which we will do differently. We'll collect it somewhere else, and put together presentation-like materials that enable me to make the idea a reality. How can we best work together to do that? All right, let's see what it says. And I'm using Claude Sonnet, which is their most intelligent model yet. Okay, so let's see what it says.
Tom, I think somehow in here, it's worth repeating the point that we've made multiple times, that the different models out there are used best for different things, that you're using Claude here, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please add to what I'm saying. You're using Claude here because it's very good at composition. It's very good at taking the material you enter into it and creating a readable document, a sensible document. We're going to also be using another model here, Grok, because it has different capabilities that make it better for that sort of work. And we would recommend to anyone listening to us, if they're doing this sort of work, to experiment a little with the whole range of LLMs and reasoning models before selecting the models you decide to use, because the different models work with information in different ways, which would produce different outputs.
Absolutely. We find for our own work, and this is, I use this a lot, even for the projects I do that are very, very sharp-edged. I use Grok and Claude because they both fit me really well. I have to use Grok because of one thing I'm doing, so is why I use the reasoning model well, but it suits me. And I like Claude. Other people can do this in ChatGPT, they can do it in Genesis. It can be done there. In some cases, they're combining the Gen AI, the LLM models, the large language models, with reasoning models into one. That's what ChatGPT 4 is. And others, I find it better if they're separated, and we'll show a demonstration of why that's the case when we're in Grok, because Grok separates the models. You have to turn from one to the other. But notice here the output, Deirdre, it says it'd be happy to help, and it's starting to ask me questions, right? Which search data have you collected? What presentation? This sort of thing. Now, I tend to not really answer these, right? Because I know the direction I want to head, but that doesn't mean you do. So you have to just kind of go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say to Claude the following. I'm going to say, excellent, let me collect my research data and I'll load it into Knowledge for you. Stay tuned. Now, why do I do this? The reason I'm doing this, Deirdre, is because I want to know when I get back to Claude, where was I? What was my intent, right? You could stop here and you could jump to a meeting and then you're coming back going, okay, wait a minute, where was I? So this is not so much because I like being polite because I'm, raised in the South and all that. Okay, that's not really it. It's more to keep me on track. And notice how I have copied my prompts. I keep a running copy of my prompts again for good research purposes so I know what works, what doesn't work, and so forth. The other thing to think about here, you will not always get the same answers. We're going to run this model now for the third time for me. I will bet I will get slightly different answers on every model that I use just by the nature of it. And comes back and it says, look, here's this. Now, I will tell you, when I did this prompt last time, it came back and said, by the way, here's the research data I'd like to have. It said it wanted market research and competitive analysis, target customers, financial projections, all this. It told me that. Notice how this time it didn't really do that. So this is what a large language model is. It doesn't always give you the same answer. Now, Grok doesn't really know. I mean, Claude doesn't know here that I have done this before because they separate things into separate sections and they don't load it up into their training. So, but this is interesting that it didn't give me as much specificity. Again, I don't really care at this point. I'm just setting everything forward and getting it going. So at this point, I'm going to do what I said. Let's go collect some research. So I'm going to move over here to Grok. Now, if you're in Twitter and you're using Twitter, you would then go to the Grok piece right here. And this is the Grok screen from Twitter. But notice I'm in beta in Twitter, but I am using Grok 3 when I go to the Grok website. And notice I have more things. This says Grok 3 is enabled. And by the way, that just went live from beta just a few days ago. But also, I could go back to Grok 2. And notice I have more options here than I did inside Twitter. So it's really important for you, those that are using Grok, is if you can't, like I'm on iOS here and it doesn't have an app yet for iOS that works the way I want to. So it's going to look here for me to sign in. So I'm going to take and pause the recording for a second, Deirdre, and we're going to sign in. And then we'll come back to this and load it up. So everybody, stay tuned and we'll be right back. Okay, Deirdre, we should be back. I successfully logged in. And you can see I'm back where we expected. It now has new workspaces here for me. So again, there's various things you can do. Just keep in mind that that it's probably best to work at grok.com if you're going to use Grok for the reasons we just said. Now, notice, you wouldn't notice this, but there is no project designation here yet in Grok. So you have to just work with the streams of chats that you have. Not terrible, but notice I can't separate out and I've got to load everything right in. So in other words, I actually have to load in either the file for my bio or I have to load in the text for Grok, which I need to do anyway, but we'll come to that. Let me go back to our prompts. So as I mentioned, the first thing I do is I start with a prompt that says, how are we going to work together on this? And so I use the same prompt. I use it always. Use how are we going to do this between the models or among the models, depending on how many I'm using. Well, let's see what it says. Okay. Now, I will tell you that I actually asked a little bit different question here. Here I said, help me collect research and perform appropriate analysis. Back here, if I go up here, I said, to take research data I have collected and put together presentation-like materials and able to make this a reality. So the prompts were not identical, they were close. Now, look what it did. It took me here, and then it said this, to help you, I've got a new business. Now, the reason why we're not going to take a lot of time, Deirdre, and go through the details of all this is because by the time we're done, we will have taken up more than an hour here. And so even though this is going to be interesting, it's more about learning the power of what we've got here. Now,
Right. And let me drop in here just another thing for our listeners to pay attention to, that when we're talking about a human-machine partnership, we know what the machine is doing. We know where it's going for information. We know how it's organizing it. But we're working in the real world here. So we have to add the whole concept of believability as we are looking through what Grok is creating for us and eventually what Claude creates for us. We have to just keep in mind, is this believable? Is this something that we could execute? Or is this machine model just giving us something for us to work with as a base, and then we as humans have to come in here more and as humans build the believability and the context, don't forget the context, into this whole thing. So I just want to float that idea for people to have it in mind as we start to go through what Grok is providing.
absolutely. And notice how it gave, I was scrolling through here as Deirdre was making the points. There was a lot of things it was talking about just from a couple of different comments, right? I haven't even loaded my bio in, I've done nothing, and it's telling me an awful lot of things. And it gave me what's called the market research and analysis summary and artifact, Newburyport, and then it had questions here. Now, again, at this point, I don't really care so much because I know where I want to go at this point. But what you're looking at here is this thing it popped up. It's the actual artifact itself. It just is giving me a view of that artifact here. So I can X out. Notice how you can download it. You can copy it. This allows you to run it again if you want. You can look at different version histories. We can talk a little bit about that in the future, how you do that. But this is the normal screen, and you saw it gave me a lot of material here. And if I spent time doing this, I'd spend more time than I need to at this point. Now notice how it's giving me things. Again, I'm not done with feeding in what I want to do here. So I want to load in my bio at this point so that it has my bio. So let's get my bio, and let me go grab that again and load it into here. Let me just copy it quickly. And again, now I have to put it actually in the chat itself because there is no project. And again, just to keep the amount of space down, if it were a multi-page document, meaning if it were 20 or 30 pages, I would put it in as a file where I'd upload the file. Because it's not, I'm going to just do this because this is meant to be a one-page document. So I'm going to put it there, and I'm just going to load this in. And it's going to, okay, thanks for sharing. Here's what I see. Tailored research and analysis plan. Notice it's giving me a lot of things, okay? And Deirdre, it looks like we've seen some of these recommendations before.
I think we have. Yes, I think the last time we ran this, it was coming up with some of the same, but certainly some of the details underlying the points are going to be different.
Now, notice how it's giving me some key steps, some ideas, potential partnerships, financial projections, and so forth. Now, you could be, you could say, hey, I'm done. I'm done. I got my research. What would you say to that, Deirdre?
I would say that we have to bring in the whole concepts of believability and context again. That so far Grok has not built in really the context in which you're working here. Now that it has your bio, it's creating more of a context, but it doesn't have the full context. But it's more also the believability. Real entrepreneurs know that you don't simply take some market research, and some things you've done previously and come up with a business plan. You have to start to drill down into other aspects of this, which then start to work towards something that can actually be executed. And that's where we want to go. It'll be interesting to see how close we get to getting something that we could actually execute successfully here. So.
Absolutely. The problem is those who have not done this in the past, you might be tempted to run with this. But you and I, Deirdre, would go a great deal deeper. We'll
Correct.
start by saying, well, can we start with community needs and match my skills to those needs and prioritize and refine those ideas? So let's see what it does. Because you and I would say, wait a minute, I know you gave a first crack at this, but let's come at it from the needs of the community.
Yeah. And you and I talk about that the needs and the value proposition rests in the community. It doesn't rest in the business itself. So we're shifting the emphasis out toward the marketplace to get a better sense of whether this can be executed successfully to yield the results that we want.
Exactly. And the point here is that ideas are a dime a dozen,
Yeah.
right? It's the how you execute and can you execute. And what we need to know is what is the market like? And it's still not going to probably give us the level of detail, Deirdre, in how deeply it goes until we go a good bit further, even than what we're getting here. Yes. So it's getting better in its things. And again, we apologize for this going through so quickly. But again, we're not intending to show you here now. It's created the artifact. And what it's doing is now displaying the artifact in this window. But what you'll see here, it looks better. It's saying, okay, here's how I would go at this. And now we're starting to get down into budgets and strengths and weaknesses, our edge. I mean, look, this is really valuable stuff. It's just we think it might be a little bit too early.
I,
So
I think so. It's still very internally focused as opposed to being something that could be executed successfully out in the marketplace.
And what it's saying is let's confirm the primary idea, meet with the Chamber of Commerce. I'm just saying, you know what? I want to go deeper. So let's go a little bit deeper. How about if we try to do all three of those ideas? I think there were three here, right? Yes, leadership training, AI consultancy, and community venture. Um, Staging implementation, starting with the one having the highest demand and least competition, requiring the least amount of time and resources to get going. Can you help analyze this? Okay. Now, when I launch this, I'm launching this in an LLM. It's likely to choke. And the reason why we're going to choke is, yeah, I see you smiling, Deirdre. It's likely to choke because I'm asking a multi-layered question that is really hard. Each one of these by themselves is hard, right? Because each one requires a deep analysis, and then you've got to go back and you've got to iterate through here. So don't be surprised if I abort this part way through. It may give me an answer, and it may give me a lukewarm answer that I want to find a different way to come at. So let's see what happens.
It's clearly thinking a lot.
Okay. So it's coming back with something decent, probably. Okay. Not bad. We're seeing similar material to what it's already done, showing the infrastructure, costs, our edge. Again, those uninitiated doing this, you're still not deep enough. Ah, I like this. It's starting to give you the weightings and the rating. Okay. Stage implementation plan. Okay. Not bad. I think you and I might cut those time periods in half. We might try to make them quicker.
But
Take
look at
two
the
weeks
message
each.
at the bottom there.
Yeah, see, here you go. Please try again. Use a different model. Okay, now, what is this telling you? It couldn't finish the whole thing because I've asked it to do too much. This is where you need to enable deep search. Now, you could enable this, and it's going to be hard to see that this little thing turns a little bit when I enable this. It's hard to know that I'm using deep search, advanced search reasoning, extended search for more reasoning. Um, you just have to know what you're doing to know that it's going to be better if you do this. So one of the things you can do is you can just be in the LLM and you can post it like this: deep search. This is outstanding. Can we go deeper? Who are the competitors, their edge, pros and cons, likes and dislikes, our potential strategic edge against them, to begin identifying the strategic gaps. But let's not do that. Let's do it this way. Before we do that, let's go back and answer that question using deep search instead of getting a partial answer like this using the LLM. And Grok 3 is an LLM. Deep search is the reasoning model, independent of, it's not, it's a separate module. Okay, so now I'm telling it, I'm going to use deep search. Yeah. So I'm telling it, use deep search. This is great, but let's do this. Now, what it's going to do is it's going to show us what the thinking is here. Okay. So you have a panel that's actually going to show you. This is telling you what it's doing. This is telling you the details. So notice how it's explaining what it's doing. That's the hallmark of a reasoning model, that it actually explains the steps it's going through, where it's getting the information with the highlights. This remains, by the way, in memory, so you can go back and look at all this. Notice again, it's looking at what I've requested, and notice what I requested was a lot, right? And this will probably take a little over a minute to go through just to collect all this. And this is only collecting the information. Now, then it's going to have to go through the actual reasoning process. See how it's saying these, it's giving me thoughts on this. Now it's planning the implementation. Phased approach, right? Integrating ideas for profit. Huh. Okay, now it's feeding it back to me. And notice how this is a good bit more detailed than we were getting before.
A good bit more and going in different directions, actually.
Yeah. Okay. But what is the one thing that it's not really doing? It's not telling us exactly who the competition is,
Correct.
right? It's telling me about competition, which is great. It's giving me ideas on competition. Competition is low. Okay, but you know what? You and I worry about this. This is the market that exists there. So you really have to wrestle that piece to the ground first, because that is what matters. That's your bedrock. You're not to the ground yet until you do that. So let's go back and let's use deep search. Can we dig a little deeper? Who are the competitors, right? Pros and cons, likes and dislikes, our strategic edge against them, to beginning identifying where the strategic gap is. Now, you and I, Deirdre, we might add even more to this. We might add, can you match them against anticipated friction in the marketplace for us being, us, you smiling, right? We can add another dimension and say, what would the likes and dislikes of that be? What would the pros and cons be of that? And what changes would we need to make to our execution plan? Now, most of the time, it would take an entrepreneur like you, Deirdre, or me, before you would ask those questions, because those are just kind of, again, this is the believability point. When a good a good leader of business that's done this before or has good leadership instincts, and there are people that are very young with no experience that have good leadership instincts writing this stuff, a good entrepreneur's edge would just that they would naturally ask that because they'd automatically see that. But the
Correct.
this is that's the hallmark. So
But it's also a piece of information that Grok might not be able to deliver on. The whole concept of friction. We don't know what programming it has gotten that would allow it to figure out what friction would exist here in this marketplace for the types of proposed businesses we're doing. Another example of the human machine partnership, as you were saying, Tom, this may be a human part that we bring in to create the context that gives us, as the entrepreneurs, the full story.
and if um, we put in our books, that concept is well described in our books, and then it
Right.
would have the information, um, or we could direct it to our books. We could do that in deep search. We'd give it a URL and say, go find it. But you see, now it's getting down into it. Now we're getting, okay, here are the actual people. Here's the audio. Here's the stuff. Um, and it tells you what each one of these people are doing. And notice how it's still researching competitors. Now we're there. Now we're there. But notice how we had to get there because otherwise we wouldn't have all the surrounding market context. And so we think it's best to go at it just like you would anything, narrow it down till you get to the bottom, and then you'll see what we do with this. And I'm coming up on 20 minutes left here if we're going to do this in a reasonable period of time, which is not terrible. About an hour is what our target was. It took me about that this morning to get you through it, the most recent version of this. But notice it's still researching competitors, and we're using deep search here. So we're using the most powerful, and by the way, I had it on the deepest search, which is deeper search. I had it there. So it's
Right.
going and doing as thorough a job as we can do
Right.
researching competitors.
Look at this comment here. That didn't yield much. Maybe I need to adjust the query or look at a different page. I noted earlier that Grok is getting more of a personality. I think that's true across all of these tools that given the popularity of Claude, which is a very personable model, very easy to work with, that all of the models are working in that direction and creating more personality, more interaction with people. Just some evolution of the models here.
Yes, you and I are more used to Grok Beta, which was 3 beta, which was a pretty straightforward, unengaging model, right? And now we're seeing real Grok 3 production level, and it's way more interactive. But notice how we are really spending a lot of time here on competitors, and this is what you and I like to see.
Right.
But no specific AI consulting. And you and I happen to know that that is a weakness in the area, AI related things. But
Right.
notice how it keeps going. And now it's looking for the gaps, evaluating the ideas. No current programs combine these things. Whether we would find that interesting or not is a different thing. All right, it's there. So
It's
it
there. Yeah.
produced a set of output for us.
Right.
Okay, so let's see what it says. Again, three different things, an overview. This is what the competitors now, this is what you and I like to see. So it's starting off saying, okay, who are your competitors? If you were taking this idea, who would the competitors be? Okay,
Right.
tells you something about them.
And
That's a
and
shame
and
because I like that term. I would,
Right. Some of these are different competitors from what we saw earlier this morning when we were running through this
yeah, we
stuff.
saw Dr. Ann.
Right.
Um, so this is then saying who's the competitor, what's the pros, what's the cons. Now, I also like to ask the question likes and dislikes. So pros and cons are different than likes and dislikes. And I like to have those known. Okay, act professional, others. strategic edge, telling it what would ours be against those. And again, this is coming from this artifact it created for us. It's talking about what the gap, it lacks group-based AI enhanced leadership training tailored to small, medium enterprises with digital and AI fluency. Competitors focus on individual coaching, broad methodologies, leaving room for scalable tech-driven programs. So then it talks about the local AI companies, IT companies rather. It shows all these things. Okay, it says, look, one query was left there. So, all right. What that says is you're pushing the envelope, which meant I probably put too many variables in that one query. But we did that on purpose to show you you will run up against, this is a paid version of Grok. I'm using it for research I'm doing for another very high priority project. And so that shows you, even with that power, it's still we're running up right against it based on the query we're using. So anyway, it talks about pros and cons here, likes and dislikes, strategic edge that we would have, the gap, implementation considerations. And then these are the citations, analysis, good. Now we're getting into real material here. It opened it up a little bit. Nantucket is a good bit away. Gloucester. Okay, good. Cambridge, getting into the Boston area. Competitive edge again. Good. Likes and dislikes, good. Yeah. Okay. And for those of you that are just listening to this, you're going to have a hard time with this particular one, just listening to it, because it's a lot of material. But it talks about a lot of this. This is all good stuff. I mean, most of this stuff is needed in the marketplace. So there's room. Pros and cons.
It's needed. And again, starting to sound a little bit like a broken record here, but this is machine output. It is not the
No, this is
of the
not
human
machine
brain.
output, Deirdre, on the competitive edges here.
No, that isn't. What we're seeing is sort of a nonsense answer in front of it of X's and O's here.
So what does
I
that
think
tell us?
we were pushing the edge,
Yep, we
pushing
were.
the edge.
We were pushing the edge, which is exactly what you and I intended to do. Okay, so I'm sorry, Deirdre, please go ahead and make your final point on this stuff.
Just making this point that while there's a lot of material here, it's not necessarily the material that we would want to pursue. It's very good. It will help us in our thinking, but you're just seeing the machine part of the human-machine partnership here. And it is a partnership before you actually execute in the marketplace. But now, go ahead, Tom.
So at this point, you're probably suffering from the exact same problem we are suffering from. We have created probably 50 pages worth of material here in about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, right? So can we take everything you have done so far and collect it all into a set of working papers for me to begin my research documentation? Okay. Notice we're still in research. We haven't even begun to try to put this together into any kind of demonstration documents or presentation documents. It's given us some documents, but I'm not sure that's enough yet. But let's just do that. This is really valuable. Keeping your mind on that just because you have not been able to keep up with this like this doesn't mean you can't ask the machine to do it for you. This is why you and I don't like to tinker too much at this phase by other than just staying with our prompts. How did we plan out to get here? And so we're going to just ask it, okay, at this point, please just summarize everything for me. And it usually says, certainly, we're glad to do that for you. Depends how. Now, I'm doing this again in deep search, so it's not giving me any human interaction here. Notice that. When I switch it, which I'll do next, I will then take, and this might be very interesting because it may not give me as good an answer here in this reasoning model as it would when I switch it back to Grok.
Right. What's interesting is just following the comments in it, it's setting out how it's thinking about doing this. And I consider this very important information because it helps you analyze the output. It helps you understand exactly what you wind up with. So you know how to work with it, how to adjust it, how to build into it more as the human part of the human machine
You
partnership.
bet. You bet. And notice it's going now, going back into a different set of groups and looking at different things. Now, you and I doing this, we would not select all this stuff, but we don't think it's a good thing yet to take and start eliminating things. We think the human aspect is better left until you've got the machines telling you what they know and how they've worked.
And
And then take it.
that's an important capability of the machine. One of the reasons you use the machines, that we as the humans may not think about some of these things. What because we all have our focuses. We've already started to think about these problems. The machine hasn't started to think. It just takes our problem and then just does a complete thinking. So it's going to surface things that may not be feasible, may not be interesting, but it's a full range of things. And that's what I think one of the interesting things about using the machine is.
Absolutely. And notice we've taken over 2 minutes now, you can see right here, to just go through and summarize all this into a set of research-like working papers, if you can call them a research working paper, but we do call them working papers because they are the research that's been created. And we know how we got it because we kept a record of the prompts. And now it's coming back with some key points. And it's putting that together in a document. So here's some working papers and going through here, creating the market analysis. So it's done a really nice job of this, giving me a lot of what it already did, but it's gone and refined it even further.
Correct. And I must say it's amusing to get impatient by saying, well, it's taking over 2 minutes to create 50 pages here. You know, your perspectives change when you work with these models a lot.
Yeah, and just look at the level of detail it's given
Right.
me here. Now, again, it's not likely to time out here, but it's getting into things like where could you do these things? The Tannery Marketplace. I mean, it's very interesting how it's doing this. There was a stage in there, many of you probably saw, where it said it was thinking about how to do the financial projections. Um, you know, Now, see, notice, reached its limit with deep search. Um, again, you're going to get good information, but you can, by the way you ask, and by the way, we did this deliberately, right? So I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to put it to deep search, but I'm going to turn off this. Now notice how this little wheel, Deirdre, I don't know if you notice, but when I go like that, I'm turning it off, like
Right.
like uh, an oven or something, which we usually do by a keypad these days, but I'm going to turn it counterclockwise. So let me just confirm that it's counterclockwise. Okay, it's counterclockwise. So that means I'm in the raw LLM. Okay, so let's see when I do that. I ask that same question in the LLM versus asking it in the reasoning model. And my sense is we're going to get slightly different approach to the working papers.
And a lot more quickly.
Yeah. Now, can I evaluate this against the other one? Not yet. I'd have to study them, right? Which is something that takes time. But you're doing the work. like this in a level of speed that you just, like I've said before, the machine waits on us. The question is, how long does it wait? And it's waiting a lot longer every single moment we go by. Okay. It's giving me a lot of stuff.
Yes, it is.
Next steps, citations. Okay. Um, and this again is the artifact it created for me, the working papers artifact, and it's now going to go ahead and talk about the details, questions I have. Okay. Now, at this stage, I want to say, um, I'm going to just stop and let me take one of these. I think I'm going to take this one and copy this one, Deirdre, and put it into Claude. So let's come back over to Claude and let's go down here. Now we have reached Claude. So let's go back and we've only got the beginnings of Claude here. And I'm going to go back to the project itself. This is new project 2. Let me go back to that screen. Here's the chat itself. But I want to add another piece of knowledge. I want to add this is the research. Excuse me, the working papers from Grok. And we think of this as the research phase, right? Okay. And now I'm going to paste that in there. And I now have the working papers from Grok in there like this. And it will properly format this the moment I add it. It will put it in the appropriate context for this. Notice how it reformatted it into 434 lines. And there it is. Okay. That's how it likes to have. So it's got the working papers in our bio. So now I'm back here in Claude, and again, just for my own purposes, I'm going to go back into here, and I'm going to go at the end where I said, let me collect my research data. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to continue. I have uploaded knowledge into Knowledge my research working papers for us to use. Please let me know your recommendations for next steps. So let's see what it says. Okay, it says it's got a wealth of information, potential business ventures, 3 things. Decide on your primary focus, create presentation materials, identify immediate action plans, develop a marketing approach. Would you like me to start creating any specific materials, or would you like to clarify things? Okay, so let's do this. Let's just ask the question that we would like to ask here. I still don't want to do any work yet, Deirdre. I just want to know what it can do,
Right.
right? So I don't want to do any work yet. So for start, how much of this can you provide? I can provide you with several presentation levels. Okay, executive summary. Okay, that sounds good. But accessible document covering investor pitch, marketing page, 1-pager, implementation checklist. Okay, which of these 3 business concepts? Okay, so let me come back here. How about this? Let's just say, how about this? Let me get my cursor in the right place here. Perhaps to go deeper, could we start with a leadership mindset? Is that what it's calling it here, Deirdre? The first idea?
I think that it's actually talking about the Leadership Academy as the first idea. I think our previous iteration was the mindset.
Okay, so Leadership Academy, so I need to change
Right.
that.
An interesting shift there, by the way.
Yeah, again, we haven't done anything differently, except we did use the deep search a little bit more than we had in prior. I'll develop detailed materials, okay? Detailed business plan, 8 to 10 page document covering visual presentation, action plan checklist. Should I proceed? And let's go ahead and say yes. Please proceed. Here we go. Executive summary. Implementation plan, competitive analysis, financial highlights, next step. Okay. Now it's going to give me a business plan document. Now, if we had put our book in here, Deirdre, on business planning, it would have done that based on our approach to business planning, which is a little bit more detailed than this.
A lot more detailed than this, but even so, this is very far along in starting to think about doing this sort of project.
Yeah, it's good. It's a really good start. It's a
Yes.
really good start. It's it's getting closer to low-level believability, but again, it's lacking some of the actual believability of the execution itself.
You've used the phrase a very good graduate student at times,
Yes.
Tom. That's what we're seeing here. This is a good graduate student going out and knowing what the format of the end is to be, having information and putting the information in the format. But it does need the human supplement here, the whole believability, the context, the sense of whether this can be executed, the making the decisions, confirming all of the decisions that have been made. But it's certainly holding up the machine part of the human-machine partnership here.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think you and I we would start by narrowing the ideas earlier and then getting into the execution ability, the operational execution of all this stuff a little bit earlier. So there's a lot of things you and I would do to take this. We'd also figure out how does it interact with the work we're already doing. So this is be a lot like you might do if you were doing uh, a new idea within an existing business, like we have an existing business. So we then need to ask, how would this integrate with the work we're doing in deep business? How could it be a part of that? How could we brand it? All that sort of thing. There's a lot of aspects where, by the way, again, this can provide a tremendous opportunity, but you can see this has done work that it knows what it's doing when it comes to performing the work. What it lacks is the entrepreneurial edge that is lack of showing up. Okay, we could keep going. So let's ask this question. I have too many questions here, Deirdre, but I want to show the power of what you can do. So I think this is a worthy question. Okay, giving me a lot of ideas to think about. To get started, how much of this could I get started and do remotely from my home in Scottsdale, Arizona before relocating to Newburyport, Massachusetts? Well, one of the things you and I would do, Deirdre, is first of all, I'm not sure we'd necessarily choose Newburyport. I might choose it because I have family there and I love it and I love the North Shore. And as a kid, I grew up in Massachusetts in the summer times. Um, and my family is originally from Boston, the Cowan family. So um, I have a draw there. But I happen to know that my son, who lives in Newburyport, he loves Stowe, Vermont. And you and I might say, yeah, that's not bad. I mean, it's a little further, Deirdre, for me to go, but I might not terribly mind that at some points. It's a cool place. Why don't we choose Stowe? Now, this is
Right.
the entrepreneurial edge again, right? This is, wait a
But
minute, why choose Newburyport? Why wouldn't we choose where the opportunity is the greatest? Why aren't we starting there?
correct. But what we're pointing to, Tom, is remember it was the very first prompt in Claude where you specified Newburyport.
Mhm.
And what we're pointing to is the decisions humans make as they're part of this whole thing that may limit the work of the machine part of the project. So maybe we should have started by saying, we want to develop this business in along the Massachusetts shoreline. What's the best city? And then move forward along with the analysis.
And you and I would do that. And
Yes,
we may do some of this, by the way. I think we will do some of this. And the question would be exactly that. We would
right,
turn it around. We'd come up, we would narrow this down. We work this through to the end where you and I put our entrepreneurial edge on it and gotten to what is the idea that we want to pursue. Then we would turn it around and say, here is the idea we want to pursue. Here's all the detail. And we'd load it in as a set of knowledge to Grok and say, now, where on the East Coast should we do this?
right.
Right? Or where in the United States should we do this? Or where in Australia should we do this? That's the way you could really get huge power out of this.
But
Um,
you'd also probably want to put in there some components of the marketplace that we think our target customers are this. So given that, where is the best place? That's why you have to think through the prompts carefully, or maybe do that in a two-part prompt. You're like, where should we do this? Are there enough of our target customers there? But
See,
you
I
think,
would carry the idea that we're talking about all the way to the end
yeah,
with a definition of the target, the whole thing for Newburyport, and say, here's what we would like to do that would give us the full business plan, all built the way you and I would build it. Then take that and ask Grok or another LLM, actually, we want a reasoning model to say, now, with that concept all the way through, is Newburyport the best place to do it in the United States? Or are there other better marketplaces? Right? Because we've already given them all those definitions in it.
right.
And then we go through and do the sensitivity. What
Yep.
could we change that might change your answer? Right?
And what you're really talking about now is a very powerful aspect to this, that you'd probably get different information and different answers based on your structure of your prompts
There's no
how
doubt you
you
would.
and how you ask the question. So this is part of the whole human aspect to this, of having to think through ahead of time, or the desirability of thinking through ahead of time, or maybe just letting it run and then thinking through qualifying prompts to
There you
drill
go.
down further into usefulness. And I'm going through this just to tell listeners that there are different ways to get at the information these models provide, depending on what you want the output to be and how you're going to be using that particular output.
So let me just give you the next step of this, Deirdre. Here it says you can accomplish quite a lot, right? You can do it remotely from Scottsdale. Before there, here's what you could do. Now we could go back and say, we'd like to do it that way. Please update all the materials. And it would do that.
Yes.
I'm not going to do that for the sake of time here. I would normally put in this prompt right here to just stop for the moment, which says, you've given me a lot. Can we take everything you've done so far, collect it all in a set of documents for me, and perhaps a set of selling documents? Now, I'm going to have it do this while I'm talking here, and it will do that. It'd be happy to do that. Now, it's kind of done this already, but notice how it's going to go through and do it again, but it's going to really do it properly. This is the other side of working documents, right? So working papers is a part of our research. This is asking for give me a set of development documents, idea development documents, which is what we're really doing here. Now, what you and I would probably do with this, Deirdre, is we would go through and we would push on all of the assumptions and have it redo all of the assumptions. This is the kind of thing you have a very difficult time doing as a human and keeping up with all the details, where the machine adds that huge value. Now, here's the idea though. And I'm not going to go through this, but you can see this is the partner piece, meaning this is the document I'd sit Deirdre down and say, oh, look, here's the opportunity. Here's our advantage. here's the investment structure. And by the way, if I were doing this for us, I'd have Deirdre's material in there too. And then the concept presentation, the vision, the mission, the service offerings, the unique value prop, the market analysis, the competitive advantage, the financial overview, revenue projections, break even, investment return, a roadmap, opportunity, ideal partner profile, right? Because it doesn't know I have Deirdre, who's my long-standing partner in doing business stuff and a long-standing friend and actually mentor to our family. So notice how it's going through here. It's telling me now what I've done, right? Which is tremendous. Now, one of the things that we would do here is I would just say at the end, for the sake of just keeping the prompts clear so that when I come back to this, I know where I left off, I'm going to say, thank you. Let me take all this and study it. I'm all good for now. And thank you again. And notice it comes back, and now it's got a very, nice human edge to it. And it comes back and says, good luck. And then I say, there we go. You did a great job. I appreciate it. Now, I would tell you, if you do this in Grok, Deirdre, not here in this Grok, but in your app Grok on your phone, this will say good Grok. This will say bad Grok. Right? It's absolutely hilarious, which you'll notice in Grok. Now, it may not say that now in the production, but that's what it said in the beta. So we have done an enormous amount of things here. I'm going to stop the share, and you and I can close this. Now, we would spend hours on this, but
Correct.
we'd spend hours on the kinds of analysis that Deirdre and I just talked about. Now, if you were going to use this in a classroom, how would you use it? The same way. You'd
Correct.
say, I want you to do this. And then say, by the way, I want you to analyze different marketplaces, 3 different marketplaces. I want you to analyze 5 different assumption variances. That's the work I want to see you do.
Right.
And then you're knowing how much the human is doing. If you keep it together, I have to see your working papers. I have to see your stuff. So I can see who's doing what here. And what we would do is structure it so that it's more and more the human near the end, and it's more and more the model at first. Why? Because we expect, first of all, we'd love to see every entrepreneur who's working today and person building things at the C level to be able to do what you and I just did. And there's
Correct.
no reason in the world why you can't do this, right? Because everybody has at least this level. I mean, I'm no genius here. Um, and so it's a matter of just learning how to do this. Every entrepreneur should learn this, but every future MBA or future Master of Science or future MS in technology, they should know how to do this, or a CTO, they should know how to do this. Um, and they ought to be learning this in school so that when they come out to do an internship or they come out to do a job, they have this under their belt, and this is an expected opportunity. So this is where they could be incredibly valuable to the organization. We're already scheduled to help an organization later this week, or I am, because you're going to be unavailable, unfortunately. But to do this, to just teach their C-level people to do this. Now,
Right.
these, by the way, videos are precursors to get them ready for that. We'll just go through and let them do it and let me watch. And so this is what we're trying to say, is that the value is what the human does. And it's so at the end, there's as much or more content that the human has contributed to the thing than the machine, which is
I
really
think
where it
it's
needs to be.
Yeah, I think it's a greater amount more, particularly when you think about the preparation for using these
Yeah.
models. But I think what you're pointing to is that these models, whether they're the LLMs or the reasoning models or whatever is coming along, are becoming tools. They're tools that you use, sort of like almost Excel spreadsheets. That does a sort of analysis for you, and that you have to know how to use them, but then you also have to prove to me, particularly as a professor in the classroom, that you've added the human component in here, that you don't simply hand in the output from the reasoning model.
Well, because they wouldn't be just doing that. They have to give you both their working papers, they have to give you their also they have to give you their output documents, right? And I'd want to see their prompts.
Absolutely.
I'd want to see
All
their
of it,
prompts.
all
So
of
if
it
you
has
see
to do
all
with the
three of those
logistics.
and you see how the prompts helped you get from
Right.
there, and we have them all listed here. They're prompts by model. What were the prompts we went through? I copy them, I write them in a document, and then put them in,
Correct.
so that I know how I got there. You know
Right.
that because you've seen them,
Oh, yes.
but that's the way you do it. And then you give those three pieces of documentation back. That becomes your documentation of what you did. So then, Deirdre, you can look and say, okay, I see how you directed your thinking. I'm not sure you got to the bottom of it yet, and it shows in your outputs, right?
Right.
But anyway, it's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Tom. So
I
long for
had
now.
too much fun today. Sorry.
It is fun. Yes. Okay. So long.